We want to welcome you all to the Institute of World Culture, Concord Hall. We're here in Santa Barbara. In case you don't know, the Institute of World Culture is a nonprofit, and it's dedicated to lifelong learning and universal brotherhood, which is pretty much the loftiest goal. And the other aspect of that, of course, is that universal brotherhood is a fact, right? I mean, everything's interconnected. It's just that we ignore it. So we're trying to keep the awareness of the fact, and that's why in 1976, the declaration was the Declaration of Interdependence. And of course, now that's a very common word. It was not so common in 1976. I'm Robert Moore. I'll be the chair for this evening, or this afternoon. Now, if you want more information about the Institute of World Culture, on the internet, worldculture.org. Worldculture.org. You can find all our programs, a lot of other information. And then we stream live events like this when we're not having technical problems like today. We stream live at IWC, what is it? It's IWC in Santa Barbara. And if you look at the YouTube channel, you can see a lot of the programs that have been recorded. So you can check that out as well. The program that you're going to hear today is Songs of Concord. And Joseph Miller and his wife actually commissioned Phyllis Zimmerman to compose these songs. So not only is he presenting, but their very creation was partly his and his wife's inspiration. So we thank you, Joseph Miller, for that. The theme for the year is opening doors through nonviolence and magnanimity. And all of the activities, we pursue certain aims. The aims that we'll be pursuing of the Institute this afternoon are to honor through appropriate observance the contributions of men and women of all ages to world culture, and also to enhance the enjoyment of the creative artistry and craftsmanship of all cultures. So that, in a large sense, are what we'll be pursuing. At the end of the presentation, there'll be time for questions. And so we ask you to hold your questions till then. Our speaker, Joseph Miller, is known to those of the Institute. He's given a number of presentations. He's really a multifaceted person. He's a singer-songwriter, a musician, a poet, an essayist, a humorist, a dramatist, many things. Also a craftsman and a local businessman. But to give you the specifics, he's been a member of the Institute since 1984, given presentations on J.S. Bach, P.L. Travers, Henry David Thoreau. In January, he presented on Plato's dialogue, the Gorgias. He sang with Canticle for 9 years, where he says he made friends with intrepid souls who helped him stage a tribute to Walt Whitman, sponsored by the Institute of World Culture, which was awarded to Santa Barbara, India. He has written performing arts reviews for the Santa Barbara Independent and hosted the Classical Now on KCSB. And he is a local business owner. Says he's wandered the town for 40 years, blocking great views with draperies and blinds. So we'll see how much of a view he blinds us today. So let's give Joseph a nice warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this hot afternoon for this event. It warms my heart to see some old friends here today. Very beautiful. So in 2005, my wife Kim and I commissioned a piece of music. At the time, I was singing in the group Canticle, as you heard, and we approached Phyllis Zimmerman, local composer and choir director. Phyllis had been directing Canticle Choir for 10 years at that point. And before that, she had been directing Santa Barbara High School's groups for 25 years. The piece that we commissioned was in 4 parts, and we called it the 4 Songs of Concord. The music was dedicated in gratitude to Raghavan and Nandini Iyer, who, as some of you know, are the founders of this Institute of World Culture. Longtime professors at UCSB and Santa Barbara City College. They also founded a branch of the United Lodge of Theosophists, which is a group that is dedicated to understanding and living out principles from the world wisdom traditions. All 3 of these educators, Phyllis Zimmerman and Raghavan and Nandini Iyer, have now passed away. Last year, Nandini Iyer passed away, and it was suggested by a member here of the Institute that it might be a good time to revisit these Songs of Concord. After all, it had already been 17 years. If Concord had been a child of mine, I'd be getting ready to send little Concord off to college by now. In fact, one of our singers, Maria, and if you see the footage, she was very pregnant at the time she was singing, a star soprano in Canticle. So her son is right now a twin of Concord, so they're moving through life together. So in remembering these educators, I'm reminded of the very word educate, and educare, the Latin word which means to draw out. And all of them, to me, represent this incredible ability to help their pupils broaden their perspective and to help their pupils discover they have abilities they didn't know they had. And the other thing about them is I think that they facilitated introductions with excellent classic works. They helped their pupils enter what Robert Hutchins called the great conversation. That people who commune in mind and heart with the great works of literature, philosophy, great compositions, all of that, they all played at that level. And they invited us into that kind of level of conversation as well. So any singers, you will realize, probably, if it hadn't been for Phyllis Zimmerman, you would never know about, William Billings and early American music. You wouldn't know about Palestrina and Victoria, the great Renaissance composers, or various choral works of Brahms. All of the great American spirituals that Phyllis used to end her concerts with. She introduced us to all of those. We got introduced from the inside where we sang them. And as for Raghavan and Nandini Iyer, many of us, we would never have read Plato's dialogues or heard about Plotinus or known about English romantic poetry of Wordsworth and Shelley, or knew about the yoga tradition represented in the Bhagavad Gita. All of these things they opened up for us, and not as kind of a deferential genuflection in some kind of detached scholarly way, but in ways that made them alive for us, that they're living in real dialogues that we can become a part of, and we become better people because of it. So in coming together today, we're really seeing where these 3 meshed in this piece. And the 4 Songs of Concord, it just so happened it came at the very end of Phyllis Zimmerman's 46-year career directing. In fact, at the time, none of us knew that was the end, that she was planning to retire. I don't know if she knew she was going to retire at that point, but she did, and she went out with this incredible commission. So our plan for today is I'm going to tell a little story, tell the story about the commission, because one of the ideas is before we all become witless and the wheel of life moves on, we should probably record what had happened and why the commission came about. And then we're going to, I'll talk a little bit about the pieces too, and then we'll listen. We have a pristine recording of the 4 Songs of Concord, thanks to Barbara Hirsch, an Opus 1 mobile recording. Barbara Hirsch, if you don't know, is the ears and the memory for all great sounds that are happening in this town, from the symphony to Camerata Pacifica, her long relationship with Phyllis and Canticle. So there's a lot of really great music that's never been published, by the way, that is in the Canticle archives that Barbara's responsible for. So we'll listen to that, and then we'll have time for discussion. And then before we cut off, there's a couple of videos I'd like you to see that have to do with the night of the performance. So we'll do all of that. Okay, so to begin with, oh, there's a phone call. If that's Phyllis, I can take the call. She's telling me, what did I miss? Okay, so to begin with, we're going to have an invocation. And so for that invocation, we'll turn to that great text, the Oxford Book of Prayer. Could there ever be a more forbidding-looking book than that? It's very forbidding look. Actually, don't let the appearance fool you. It's actually a great anthology that was put together in the mid-'80s by an Englishman who he brought together invocations and prayers from all the great traditions. But the one I'm going to choose came from my copy alone. And my copy was inherited from Phyllis Zimmerman's library. And it sat on my shelf a number of years before I discovered an amazing poem in the Oxford Book of Prayer, which was folded in there. It wasn't what George Appleton had put in. And here's what I found. On a piece of hotel stationery, in Phyllis's own hand, in her own autograph. Are there any singers here who recognize what's going on there? Brian?
Yeah, that's Beauteous World.
Beauteous World. It is indeed Beauteous World. And it appears to be perhaps her original writing of the poem. I mean, there's cross-outs and corrections still on it. And there it is. Beauteous World, if the Songs of Concord came at the end of Canticle, Beauteous World came a decade earlier at the beginning of Canticle. And she wrote this poem, and then she composed music for it. And in only the second season, Canticle learned and performed that great piece. And Beauteous World it warms me not only to find this incredible autograph, but also to think that it sat there for a decade and a half between the pages, rubbing shoulders with Plotinus and New Testament prayers and the great sermonizers, John Donne and others. And also that probably she was using that book when she wrote it. How else would it have come into it? And it comes from such a pure place. I mean, this beautiful plea, beauteous world, swirling sphere of God's gravity, reclaim the truthfulness of our minds. To care enough for the spinning of new centuries. A really remarkable sentiment. So let's listen to Canticle perform this. Okay. Well, if we're going to talk about Concord, we should probably talk about the word Concord. And here's your dictionary lesson for the day. Concord is a state of agreement, of harmony, appropriate to talking about choir singing. It's a harmonious combination of tones simultaneously heard. And I think what's even more interesting is the etymology, that it has the word heart in it. Concord literally means to coincide at heart, to share heart, to be in agreement about core values, core perceptions. And it's interesting that if Phyllis's career ended with the Songs of Concord, it began at the college in Moorhead, Minnesota, called Concordia. So from Concordia to Concord. Concordia, well known for its choral traditions, one of the key educational centers for the whole Norwegian Lutheran tradition that Phyllis came through. And if you go to Concordia today, you can see her name etched on a glass window there, because a year after she ended Canticle, she was awarded by Concordia the Distinguished Alumnus Award and went out for that ceremony. And I happened to be traveling in North Dakota for a family reunion, and I stopped by Concordia. And I started, walking around the campus, examining all the glass. And finally I had to get Phyllis on the phone. Hello, Phyllis? I'm at Concordia, and I'm looking for your name. And she led me. I think it's at the gym, as I recall. and there it is. She would, at that time, she would direct you to it if you called. So, as you can see, also, it's interesting. You're in Concord Hall, and the building, the main building for the Institute of World Culture is Concord House. So Concord kind of runs deep, and it makes sense that the meshing of these wheels would use that very beautiful word. So my wife and I commissioned this work in one telling of the tale. There's an alternative telling of the tale, which is that the roots of the Songs of Concord began 20 years earlier than that, in 1985. And to tell that story, I have to show you the cover of another anthology. And today you can leave, and you said, well, we went to a slideshow, and the guy showed us covers of books. And this anthology, you'll recognize the name. It was edited by Raghavan and Iyer. This anthology was given to Phyllis as a gift in 1985. Phyllis's dear life partner, Lori Ballin, who was once upon a time a student of Phyllis's, and later in adult life they became life partners. Lori has always lived in Pittsburgh, but she would always come out for twice a year for our concerts of Canticle to support Phyllis and to share her wisdom with us and just to be a real solid presence, a very appreciative person. She herself became a music teacher because of Phyllis's influence. So Lori was visiting from Pittsburgh in '85 and stopped by a local bookstore, and it was probably the Vedanta bookstore, and she picked up this book, and she gave it to Phyllis as a gift. And you can see the inscription. She said, "With deepest affection to my dear Phyllis, may this jewel of a book nourish and inspire you as you have throughout our fast friendship. With much love, Lore, March 18th, 1985. Well, why am I showing you this book? Because 3 of the 4 pieces for the Songs of Concord came from this anthology. And when Lorraine wrote, "May this jewel of a book nourish and inspire you," who knows the power of her pen at that time? but it seems as though maybe there was a slow cooking line of karma that eventually caught up. And Kim and I were merely passive puppets in what was destiny anyway. So, the idea for the commission, I don't really remember all the details exactly, but probably like most good things in my marriage, it came from my wife. And she exercised the skill of making me think it came from me. But it reminds me of just a note about the whole supportive spouse thing. You know, the discipline we had in Canticle Choir, this tradition that Phyllis inherited, was very demanding. It was really hard singing. It was complex polyphony, and you had to memorize everything. And you would memorize every season about 18 pieces. And probably more than half of them weren't in English. So you were learning phonetically Latin or German or Russian or some form of pidgin Spanish that hadn't been spoken since the 1600s or whatever. You know, there was a lot of, and so it was a hard discipline. It would have been impossible without a kind of solidity and concord of the choir, but also the support of spouses and families. That was a huge thing. And Phyllis was well aware of that. She was well aware of the invisible choir, the inaudible choir of family and supportive spouses. So I think it was very meaningful for Phyllis that both Kim and I approached, because Kim was as much a presence on Phyllis's horizon as I was. And Kim and I approached Phyllis on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas in 2004. We took her out for dinner at the Moby Dick on the pier, had a nice dinner, and then we broached the idea with her. We told her what we were thinking of doing. And we showed her these 4 texts at the time. And she sat quietly and read them. And I recall when she was reading a passage from what's called the Voice of the Silence, which is Tibetan precepts, she had tears. And and she immediately accepted the commission. She was very grateful. She was very excited about it. But we didn't know when it was going to be. We didn't know what is this? Does she take a year with this? Does she take more than a year? How long does it take to do this? But that wasn't the case. She didn't suddenly go on some kind of composer's retreat. She dove right in. She had to immediately start rehearsing a spring season of regular music, and at the same time she was composing this. And she composed in about 8 or 9 weeks, finished by early March, and then started rehearsing it with the choir. As she heard the choir, there were some tweaks she gave, but by and large, it was her inspiration. You know, she had already finished it. And she was so energized and so excited by this. It really struck her in such a powerful way. She had said to me on multiple occasions, "This experience has changed me. This has caused changes inside of me." And she asked Kim and I for some, how did we visualize certain things? What did we see? But in the end, it was just extraordinary what she came up with. So try to imagine, she was 71 years old at the time. And now I really appreciate the courage of the woman, the bravery to do this at that age. She was experiencing mobility issues, health issues. But the fact that she could just launch off with total faith. She used to say singing was an act of faith, total faith that this was going to happen. And not only compose it, but get the choir up and going with it. So it was an experience of great inwardness for Phyllis as well. And she at times shared with me that she felt there was a strange but assuring synchronicity going on between the inward experiences she was having in composing the music and outward experiences that were going on. And one of them was that she walked into a store where there was an extraordinary gong. I mean, a really well-built gong. I mean, there are gongs and then there are gongs. And this was extraordinary, like very careful spun metal on the outer end, and then at the ridge, and then a piece of different kind of metal that had been carefully welded in some way. Anyway, a gazillion overtones, a million sounds. It's just incredible. But she walked up to the gong and she took the mallet and she hit it in 4 places, moving from the outer rim to the center. And she said that the gong gave her the 4 notes for what the piece she was composing at the time, called Charity Immortal. And I'll talk in a little bit about those 4 notes. And then another experience she shared with me was she had been on an outing and she came back to the car and she opened the car door, and on the seat of the car was a white feather. And not just some little pinion that might have stuck to your clothes, but I mean a feather, a big feather. And all the windows had been up and the doors had been closed. And I asked her, well, why is that significant to you? And she said, the white feather is a symbol of the scribe. So as commissioners, we were gifted the scribe's feather. So let's before we hear the piece, let's talk a little bit about the texts and a little bit about the structure, so you have a sense of what you're listening for. By the way, the piece is 15 minutes, so we'll listen to it uninterrupted. And I'll put the text on the screen so you can kind of follow what you're hearing. The 4 texts were chosen in a way to represent the Iyers' life. Because, first of all, these texts we know were very dear to them because they appeared in publications and things. I should tell you one other thing. Another very interesting fun fact. That anthology, The Jewel and the Lotus, it was printed in this very room. This Concord Hall was a full-on book press for about 14 years. Had a photography department, of full printing presses, bindery, and there was a crew of us. It was voluntary work. It was great fun. It was beautiful. We produced that beautiful book here. So in another way, it's interesting to have this now because it comes home. So these passages were dear to the Iyers, and there was one chosen from India, where they were born. There was one chosen from England, where they were educated at Oxford and where they taught. There was one chosen from America, the California poet Edwin Markham, who was also a farmer. And then finally there was one chosen from the Tibetan Mahayana Buddhist tradition, because they were not Buddhists, but that tradition was very dear to them. They were close friends with the Dalai Lama. Raghavan was one of the first people, when no one had heard of the Dalai Lama. A year after his exile, Raghavan went to meet with him in 1960, and the family has been fast friends with him ever since. And he's come to the Institute. So that was kind of the basic idea. And so the first text is called Concord. It is the lead title page in the Jewel and the Lotus book. And it comes from the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is the oldest known book in Sanskrit. It's the oldest book known in any Indo-European tongue. It's a huge book. Over 1,000 various chants are in it. These are literally the closing words of the whole thing. In this English translation, you can find other translations. And just an incredible plea for unity at heart. Common be your prayer, common be your goal, common be your purpose, common be your deliberation, common be your wishes, your hearts in concord, your intentions in concord. Perfect be the union amongst you. And in Phyllis's setting of the piece, she uses that word common at the start as a heartbeat. She has it going, come on, come on. And the whole piece reminds one of, it has the whole feeling of the dawn hour. It's subdued and quiet, but it has an incredible sense of anticipation of what's to come. The second piece comes from a book called The Voice of the Silence. That was Helena Blavatsky's book of Tibetan and other precepts mostly from Mahayana Buddhism that she had learned from heart when she was a pupil in the Himalayas. And this piece, I think she put the most into. It's the longest piece there is. It's the most dramatic piece there is. It is the piece that caused her to well up with tears when we showed her the text at the restaurant. And what's most characteristic about this piece is this descent of 4 notes that is the wail of the cries of the world. So you'll hear again, and this descent of wailing overlaps. It's transposed to different areas in the scale, and as those wails are answered then by each of these verses. So first it's, let your soul lend its ear to every cry of pain. And then after that, and each of the line, the chorus begins the line, but then a soloist finishes the line. Remarkable soloists, by the way, very remarkable. Hard lines to sing, beautiful soloists. Soloists who gave their all when they did this. The wails continue, and then the chorus comes in again with comforting wisdom. Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself hast wiped it from the sufferer's eye. Again, after the wailing, the wisdom, let each burning tear drop on the heart and remain there, don't brush it off until the cause is removed. So a very Buddhist notion. Don't treat the symptoms. Don't take an aspirin. I don't know, maybe Buddhists take aspirin. But don't treat the symptoms, but get to the cause, have to get to the cause. And of course, that brushing off is what we do. We slough off the suffering or the concerns of others if we can focus on our stuff. So in this very lofty, precept, it's sort of, it echoes what the Mahayana Buddhists call the bodhisattva idea, the notion that there are enlightened beings who have gone through the school of life and they don't need to come here anymore, but they come anyway to help weaker human beings who need their help. So what happens after that third verse is something very amazing, and you'll hear. So pay attention, because that fourth verse, these tears, suddenly the whole thing opens up and it gets very large. And when Phyllis told me about this, she said she didn't even know where this came from. She said her hands just found their way on the piano. She didn't even know how to musically analyze the key she was in. And the manuscript is full of accidentals. I mean, it's just, she was like, I'm not even going to try to find the key signature here. But she just heard it. And it becomes very large, and it reminds those of us who sang with Phyllis of Grachaninov or Rachmaninoff, these great, great Russian choral composers. And that's kind of a curious thing, because of course north of Tibet is Russia, and the translator for that book was born in what is today Ukraine, which is unfortunately being piteously attacked. And finally, the whole thing is so large and so big it needs to be put back down, and as it's lowered, the choir sustains what are called open fifths, and a single soloist comes in and redefines the key in minor, in a very quiet minor thing, to suggest this midnight, almost invisible, almost unknown fact of a human being reaching enlightenment, which is so important to the human race as a whole, but happens in the quietest conditions. And here you can see, there you see the descending notes. And then how they begin in the sopranos, then they start overlapping with the altos. Okay. The third one is the only one that was not found in the Jewel and the Lotus. But those of us who had Raghavan Iyer's poli-sci classes at UCSB know this aphorism, because he used to repeat it. It's amazing how much can be said with so little. This is Edwin Markham's epigram. I think it was originally called Outwitted. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. So a great statement of magnanimity and inclusiveness and forgiveness. And most of us say, oh, I'm very inclusive, but the moment we find out that we're being excluded by somebody, we exclude them, right? But apparently, if we had love and wit as our companions, we wouldn't do that, according to Edwin Markham. Of course, since it's a circle, he drew a circle, and Markham's drawing a larger circle. Phyllis set it as a round. So the music moves in a round. It begins with a single soloist. It's a beautiful line she came up with. And then it gets, as the piece develops, you can see the overlapping parts in the round shape. Beloved and beautiful. And then the final piece is a passage from Percy Bysshe Shelley's Prometheus Unbound. And I've looked it up. It's like, Prometheus Unbound is a pretty large work. It's not, it's a kind of seems like a little passing passage by one of the spirits speaking in the chorus at one point. But it is so telling. It's such a remarkable statement. And, in our singing, of course it's great for a choir, in our singing shall build in the void's loose field a world for the spirit of wisdom to wield. So yes, if we want to create human unity, if we want to create something that can become a focus for the Holy Spirit, the spirit of wisdom, we can't do it by iron and by conquest and by coercion and by fear and by economic leverage. We have to do it by singing. We have to do it by the kind of living unity and community that singers know, that kind of vulnerability and trust. That creates, in the void's loose field, the right world that would invite the spirit of wisdom. The void's loose field, who knows, for Shelley it could be a transition time of social unrest, when there may be an opening for something more. We will take our plan from the new world of man, and our work shall be called the Promethean. Why will it be called the Promethean? Well, Prometheus was the patron of phone calls. Hermes is like, the communication god between worlds. But it's called because Prometheus was the patron of rebels. Prometheus was that Titan that broke away from Zeus and helped mankind against Zeus's wishes and willingly accepted the punishment for helping human beings, enlightening their minds, giving them the gift of fire, teaching them how to use it with the crafts and the arts, teaching them language and mathematics. So that was what Prometheus did. So Prometheus stands for the enlightenment of the human race. And also, of course, being associated with fire, it ties it back to the Rig Veda passage, because I don't think I mentioned it, but the Rig Veda passage comes in a hymn to Agni, who is the god of fire in Hinduism. So this notion of fire is in all traditions. Fire is the great purifier. Fire is the great, represents the fire of fervency, the fire of love. It represents aliveness, intentness, and of course transformation above all else. So that's kind of a thumbnail, and I think we could now listen to the 4 Songs of Concord in Canticle Choir. Okay, well, we have time for discussion, questions. Yeah. Brian.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Brian.
Really tremendous gift. Thank you so much for getting us together to listen to this. I have a question. I'm going to try and tee it up for you to do a little exposition for us. So can you go back to the lyrics of Concord, please?
Yeah, I suppose I probably can. Let's see if I can.
So having shared a lot of this music-making experience with you, we can have a little shorthand here for a second?
Yeah.
So the season is much of that first paragraph. Praying that we're going to get the notes right. Our goal is this performance and our purpose in our deliberation. And I think about the second part as kind of being the point where we share it with other people. The first part we've been sharing it with each other as singers, and the second part is sharing it with others in the audience. And what I'd like for you to maybe talk about is when the scores have dropped away and we know all of the notes, and really we're in that moment where a new level of creation is taking place. We're creating something. And it has to do with concord and harmony and heart. How would you describe that experience to someone who has not had that experience before and yet can relate to the goal of that moment?
What a beautiful question, Brian. I mean, I think in some ways just what you just said is so suggestive in itself. But it is true as singers every season, and what I think was usually 15, 16 weeks, we worked together to bring to birth a program of music. And it does go through stages. It's a living thing. You know, it really is. This choral tradition's so amazing. One of the reasons it's so demanding is that, and it's part of this Norwegian Lutheran tradition that comes from St. Olaf's College and Concordia, but the music has to be memorized. The performances are so electric because there's nothing mediating the attention of the singer. It's not being mediated by sheet music in any way. So your attention is on the music, it's on your fellow singers, and it's on the director, and not necessarily in that order. And so there is this whole thing about where I always felt like we were all building a glider together, meeting every week. And this is a community choir. This isn't a school choir where you're meeting every day. This is a community choir where people are coming from their jobs and people are coming from Los Angeles. Hi, Maria. And you're building this thing and you're rehearsing on your own and you're trying to have informal sectionals and you're recording the rehearsal so you get Phyllis's notes and then you're listening to them on your earbuds while you're installing draperies. It's this kind of thing. For those of you who install draperies, and I know you're out there. So you're getting all that together, and there comes a time, you feel like you're all assembling a glider, and suddenly, it's like you don't have time anymore. Like, you can see we're approaching the cliff edge. It's right over there. It's only 2 weeks away, and this thing is going to be airworthy. And we're going to push it off, and it's going to fly. And it's always scary. It was never autopilot. It always felt like, wow, is this really going to cohere? But that's the thing is you're learning all the music, you're getting all the mechanics down, and you have a rehearsal piano at first. So you have your sheet music and your rehearsal piano as we're going on, but then eventually that's all falling away and you're working from memory, and then we take it a cappella and you don't have the piano to lean on anymore. And it's thrilling. And it shows where the flaws and the holes are at the last minute, which you didn't know. You were leaning on the piano or something. And it really then takes a life of its own. And there's really no other experience like that. It is those weeks, the last couple of weeks leading up to concert were absolutely thrilling. And, but the group, I think what Brian's getting at, the group spiritually, there's a coherence. It was a community of trust. It was bound by trust, not by egos, but by by working together. And not, you know, there's few arts that are so vulnerable as singing. You were just, I mean, you know, a lot of people are afraid of singing. To sing is a form of vulnerability and exposure, and we, of course, when we're performing this artwork, when we finally get to the performance stage, what is our medium? You know, a sculptor has a stone, you know, and a painter has their canvas and their paint. A singer has nothing but the air in the room, and whatever they have embedded in the fibers of their being up to that point, you know. So, and that's the thing, is we really were, and I think Phyllis was good at this, beginning to change our focus, get it off ourselves and off whatever insecurities we had about the music, and think about these audiences are coming. They're coming for this. They have bought tickets. They're on their way. You have something to give them. Forget about yourself. Nothing's so funny as telling a singer to forget about themselves. You know? Just forget yourself. Okay. Don't think of the pink elephant. And that we had something to extend and give these people. And of course she was well aware of the audiences and the effect it had on them. And there were all kinds of anecdotes. You know, one of the anecdotes I heard a number of times was there was a crippled woman who came up in the reception line to, you know, she was in a wheelchair, and when Phyllis was singing, and the woman said, "I'm in pain all the time, but while you were singing, there was no pain." And so you don't know. It just touched people in such a powerful way. And she made us aware of that. Brian, what did I leave out? What could you add? Hi, Lee. So nice to see you.
One thing I remember is when we talked about going off the cliff, this is one that we really were falling off the cliff until the concert. And one thing I remember is we were taking the pitches, the bass would take the pitch, and then the tenor, and then the alto and the soprano, and I had the same pitch. I took the soprano pitch, and it was the same as the tenor. It was Peter Budach who did the beautiful solo in the round.
Yes.
And that night at the concert, he took it really high.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, that's so high, but I'm going to match him. And then, finally the piece was able to go. We weren't flatting it, and you know, it was just going, and that's what it took, was just one little slightly higher pitch so that we weren't falling off the cliff.
Oh, what a lovely image. I see. Lee had that extraordinary solo, the first solo in Charity Immortal, which is just a mind-bending solo, just beautiful. Yeah. What else? Please.
So I was going to ask, but I guess you just answered the question. That was this choir recording this choir that you're referring to?
Was it recording?
The recording we just listened to, is that your choir?
It was. I mean, the choir disbanded in 2005. This was its final concert. So it was. We did 10 years of recorded music. There were 6 published CDs that we did. I don't know how it happened, but I've never known the connection on this, but there was some connection through NPR, because every year they got a hold of our Christmas concert. We do a winter concert, our winter concert recordings, and we would be featured on NPR. And I don't know if Barbara was slipping, Barbara the recording engineer was getting that to someone. Anyway, somehow it always happened. And it was really beautiful, you know. So, yes, and Phyllis, you know, she had health problems, and then she passed away 10 years ago in 2012. But she had always planned on doing something with the recorded music, publishing more, more collections of what had been recorded. Yeah.
So I'm just impressed on the quality of the choir.
Oh.
And you were saying it's not a professional choir?
It was not a professional choir, no.
It's just volunteers?
It was, yes. But it started from a corps of singers who had sung in her kind of elite madrigal singers in Santa Barbara High School. And she was extremely well known for that. And there were just huge crowds would come for these concerts. Yeah, she was extraordinary, and yeah. I'm touched. I'm very glad that it has, you who know nothing about it, it had this effect on you this afternoon. That's beautiful. That's really good. Jerry.
Yeah, can you say something about the meaning of the sequence? Why did you decide on putting each of these in the position that it is as a whole? Because it seems like there's some meaning and also maybe something about the music, but I'm wondering if you can help us understand.
Yeah. Good question. So the question is about the order. You know, it was, I don't know, it just seemed so obvious. It was aesthetics, you know, it just seemed so obvious how they had to go, that there was, that this call of Concord, you know, like I said, it has this sense of anticipation, like the sunrise, and then there's kind of the heavy dose of the strains of compassion, and then the demands in the third one, the demands of forgiveness and magnanimity. It does seem to be a kind of spiritual journey, and I think she had that in mind. And then there's some kind of, you know, incredible triumphant feeling to that regeneration, to that last one, that something has been, trials have been passed through, something's been earned, and there's something new has happened. Yeah. You know, there's a number of singers here. If any of you have any, please don't hesitate. Please share any comments you might have. Kim?
Well, remember we told her about the meditation of Ananda's story as a visual for this. What did you tell her about that?
Wow, I hadn't thought about that for a long time. She did have a lot of conversations with Kim and I about the pieces. Phyllis became very interested in the imagery of Kuan Yin, in the kind of the so-called Eastern Madonna, right? The Kuan Yin as the symbol of compassion, she's the voice deity. She's the one who hears all the cries of pain in the world, and so she became she wanted us to, you know, if we found any passages anywhere, anything, could we Xerox them and give them to her. She became very interested in that. And I think it was Kim told the story. There's an Irish mystic, George William Russell, his pen name was A.E., and he wrote a story. He probably is rewriting a story that might have been traditional Buddhism. I don't know. But he wrote it beautifully. He was a wonderful writer. A friend of Yeats and part of the Irish literary Renaissance. But he wrote a story called The Meditation of Ananda. And so, of course, I don't know if this Ananda was necessarily the Buddha's disciple Ananda. It might have been. But he, as he was seemingly in isolation meditating, what he was doing, his ideation had an effect on different people. So he goes through 3 or 4 scenarios of someone in dire need, and they get the inspiration right at that moment a king is about to mercilessly strike his foe, and who he's captured, and then he's overwhelmed by a feeling of compassion, and he exercises forgiveness. And there are other ones. I haven't read the story in a long time, so I can't remember the other scenarios. But the idea was that the changes that we make in ourselves are not isolated. We're not autonomous beings. They have effects elsewhere. And yeah, thank you, Kim. Ron, please.
A bit of a selfish question. I met Phyllis 35 years ago. I sang with her last 30 years ago. And I look at the verse that Brian asked to put up, and the experience of listening to the person to your right and to your left, tuning, matching the vowel, color, being directed and following the direction rather than the muscle memory from the sheet music, was an experience that I haven't had since.
Oh, yeah.
I had a career in the military where I went to war with my brothers and sisters, which was an amazing bonding experience in the face of incredible ugliness. I have had relationships with rehabilitation and physical therapists and in dealing with my disabilities now and the common purposes and the working together, which have been deep and intense. I'm a professional mediator, and so these words speak to me, but I have not yet found something that approaches what happened in those groups. And I'm wondering if you or anybody else has found something outside of this world that even tangentially grazes that moment where you're off music, you're off the piano, and it's the bass to your right and the bass to your left, suffering through the tenors, focusing on the sopranos, reveling in the altos. Because it's been 3.5 decades, and I'm looking, and it so far has eluded me.
Have you tried lawn bowling?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. That was the one that came out.
That was
first.
the last suggestion, and it fell flat. I even went as far as bocce.
What a great comment, and I love what you just brought in, all these other forms of commonality and unity that, from the dire circumstance of warfare, and but what is there that is so open and so such a living tissue that singers are connected by, and you bring up a lot of subtlety that maybe other people don't realize. It's not just getting together and singing together. It's not just like going door to door and singing Christmas carols with your family and friends. There's so much subtlety to it, and you learn about vowel color and coordinating your consonants together, and sometimes you don't get to that point until sometimes when the sheet music's falling away, and then you're all standing shoulder to shoulder, and then you really have to begin to blend. You have to, and even though it looks like everyone's singing at once, we know as singers there's like these independent centers situated in the choir. There is sort of involuntary leadership or sometimes voluntary leadership. There are the stronger singers, and you're connected, and you feel like a fish in a school or something. You can feel these quick movements. In fact, Phyllis could raise an eyebrow, and you would feel it shoot through the choir. You really would. It was like, whew. So it was really, no, there isn't anything like it. That's why you haven't found it. Give up.
Joe, can I say something?
Yes, Maria, please.
There's a lot of reasons, I think, why we found it so profound and incredible. I mean, there's all the technique work that we're all working on so hard to get it right. And then we start putting into use, there's all that nonverbal communication that's going on all the time. And then there is that a cappella moment, right? And I think also it's the material that we got to work on. It's like we were working on really incredible texts and great, compositions. So that in itself, and that she wanted to realize the music. It wasn't okay to be less than, as much as possible. And I think all that put together with her incredible direction, I mean, there's choirs everywhere. Why is this one so different? Because everyone else is sung in other choirs too. There's something about the spiritual nature of us all connecting together under her leadership and the trust that we give to her, because you're talking about how a painter has its canvas or a sculptor has its clay. I feel like Phyllis had us, like we were her canvas, we were her instrument, right? And then we all give it over to her, and she's literally playing us, and it allows us to get to that transcendent. I think there's the transcendence is the thing that makes it so different, than other things you experience. That you all go somewhere higher than where we're all at, and we do it together collectively, which is so powerful. That's probably what has coming back for more all the time, just to have those moments,
Yeah.
And that's why you do all the hard work, and you sit in your car and you listen to the part teams and all that.
Really, one moment, it's, thank you, Maria. That's very beautiful. And it also has to do, this was, as I mentioned early in the commission is sort of brings these three incredible educators together, the Mr. and Mrs. Iyer and Phyllis. And, you know, they were all similar. There's a similarity between the three of them. And I don't know how to exactly say it, but in some ways it was as if the very molecules of their being were packed closer than a lot of people. There was just some kind of integrity where there weren't the gaps. And so there was this gravity to them. And it got combined with the coaching function. None of the three of them were people pleasers. They were not people pleasers at all. And that takes a tremendous confidence. You know, it meant that they could perform with legitimacy that coaching function. They could challenge you. They could push you to rise up to that level, and seem harsh at times too. You know, but I remember Nandini Iyer once saying that you know, here in the West, the word guru, you know, it gets associated with all kinds of silly things. But the word's a very ordinary word in India, and it means teacher. But she said the root of the word means weight, means gravitas. That's what the word literally means. So there are people who, it doesn't matter what title they have that gravitas. And she had that, and we all recognized it, you know, and we would all come around. I remember, you know, some of our singers sang in some other different groups too. And I remember one time there was going to be a conflict. You know, usually the other groups were saying, okay, when is Phyllis going to sing? When is her, because we got to schedule around Phyllis. Phyllis has the gravity. And then I remember the Santa Barbara City College director decided to challenge that one season. And so he scheduled a conflict. And so the singers had to choose. They had to choose. And I remember Jamie, dear Jamie, was saying with me. He said, man, he goes, man, you're asking us to choose against you and the mother? You know we're going to choose the mother. You know that. So it was hysterical. Please.
Bouncing off a comment that you made and that you made, I just wanted to let you guys know from my perspective, I graduated from Santa Barbara High School in 1988, so I had Phyllis Zimmerman for mixed choir. I was 14 years old in 1984, and she did scare the crap out of me. Yeah. And so I didn't go on to anything like a cappella madrigals, but I became a devotee of listening to their concerts. Yeah. And it's affected me for the rest of my life. I'm 52 years old, right? So I joined a choir when I went to college. It was a Unity Choir, directed by Josh Gittimer, and that transformed into a whole bunch of other things through Mount Madonna and Pacific Voices and Voices of the People, and then this other one, Pacific something, and they're still going, I think. But anyway, that whole experience is what you were talking about, and I've literally not found it again in anything else in my life. Not other singing experiences, not other temples, not other churches, nothing. So I love that you brought that up. And what she said to me when I couldn't get on pitch in mixed chorus was, I said I can do it at home, and she goes, I don't make house calls. That's what I've never heard. Oh. I'm very grateful to hear you.
Yep. And this is just beautiful. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Beautiful comment. Yes, please.
I'm fairly new to Santa Barbara, so I'm learning as I hear. But was this choir always a cappella, or did they ever have orchestras?
This was a cappella, Canticle a cappella choir. Yeah, it was always a cappella.
Never had any other instrument.
No. Interesting. Yeah. So, I want to continue the discussion, but I think maybe why don't we take a short break for a couple short videos that I think you'll enjoy seeing. And can we get that? Can we do that, Russ, and have the sound and all that? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna.
Do you need this here?
Probably. I'm gonna move around here. So after this is Barbara. We performed these 2 nights in a row, and Barbara. Let's see. This is the first night. So this is May 13th, 2005, and Phyllis insisted on her paparazzi, which was Chris Coulter, to follow her right after the concert to greet Nandini Iyer and her son Pico and his wife Hiroko. So that's what we'll watch.
Are you taking a picture?
I am, man.
We had a long dinner.
Hello,
Thank you
Phyllis.
so much.
Very beautiful.
Transcendent.
Thank you.
It's
Oh,
such purity
beautiful.
and beauty. It's
Yeah,
This is the first time I've had the privilege of listening to your group.
Oh.
It's just a wonder. My mother's been telling me for years, but it really means a lot.
Beautiful. This is your magic. Thank you. It's so wonderful to have you here. It is really inspiring.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Oh, no, it really was wonderful. And so many people have been coming and saying, oh, it was so inspirational. It was so, it really was. I think well, you're always wonderful, but this was really, you got the spirit of those. So beautiful, so beautiful. Of course, we sung as usual. Well, you managed to get perfection out of them somehow.
Well,
That's your...
It's continual challenge.
And the compositions come so deep in the soul, the
Yes.
ones that you've written. You
Yes,
can tell
but you can tell.
that it's
But you see, she's been reading the Jewel in the Lotus and passages
Yes,
for
I
a
have.
long time.
For many years. Yes. And this really has changed me. Working on this has changed me dramatically.
It was just so beautiful. And I wish my husband had been here too.
I think he was.
I think he was. You're right. You're absolutely
Yes,
right.
I think he was. So we wanted to get pictures of...
yes, you have an official photographer here.
Yeah.
Who's obviously talented in many arts.
Oh yes, they are. They really are.
And you have a core group who've been working with you and singing with you for years and years.
Some of them have been, yes. There's about 14 of them who've been singing with me for 10 years. They come in and out. And many of them sang with me in high school.
Yes.
They go all the way back.
Yes, I know.
Like
Yes.
73 or something.
It's the ultimate compliment, isn't it?
Yes, very devoted to. I was, the young lady who's pregnant.
Yes.
She's come up and I said, how it's her devotion to music which lets her stand so long.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And she came up from Los Angeles?
She drives for 10 years. She has driven from Los Angeles.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Calculate the mileage or the
That's right.
gas prices she's paid.
But would you be able to stand that?
Oh, yes. No, it's...
So we need a
Yes. Kim, you too? And let's see. Kim and I are taller, but we go in the back. So we could do several different ones. We'd like to do, yes, we'll get first. Well, how about the two of them first?
Honor and privilege for me to be.
Who's the guy on the left?
My son. The child is father of the man. That's quite lovely. I know there's a lot of sound going on, but I think you picked up the gist of it. Yeah, good. And then just to give you a taste, here's, because you've just listened to it, the sound quality is less good, but here's the last 2 minutes of the piece. So this is coming halfway into Love Circle and finishing with Regeneration, just so you get a sense of what the singers look like when they're doing their thing. So are we done? Explain the mountain image? That was, let me open that back up. The mountain image, was taken by me on a climb up to Mount Hoffman from May Lake in Yosemite with a group of kids. And it just struck me, and it became the emblem of the Songs of Concord. It reminded me of some kind of breezy, sunny look Tibetan kind of thing. And it seemed to combine all the elements and the colors that were so beautiful. So it became the brand of the Concord songs. When we did, for the membership, we pressed CDs for them and we put that image on them. Yeah. Oh.
We can buy the CD?
The CD was never made publicly available. It was never.
Listen to it again.
You'd have to know somebody.
Now,
Will it be in the IWC recording now?
yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we recorded it. We didn't. Normally, we record these, but we had technical problems, and so this is it. It's very unfortunate.
Joe, do we know what the status is, or is that something that can be discussed publicly about the works that she did? They exist. Some of us have them.
Yeah.
And there has been talk with the estate, etc. But I have, with my move back here, interestingly enough, the closer I got, the more out of the loop I got, because I've been having you come over to the house to hang drapes. So where are we with all of that, if we can say?
Yeah, I got this really. I wrote to Lori Ballin about this event, and I'm so sorry. There were a lot of people out there who were going to tune into this, so it's too bad it didn't go. But she's in Pittsburgh. But it was beautiful. She wrote me. She said she wasn't. It was like wasn't at all surprised that I was doing this. She said, "It's my opinion that everything works in cycles, and that this was just going to come around, and then there would be momentum, and then we'll do the next step." So that's right. There's a whole body of recordings that need to be made public, and I think a group of us are going to do it somehow, in some way. Yeah. Kim.
I think also the people in the choir who are here, I would encourage you to figure out a way where you could share your memories. Maybe it becomes a book, I don't know. But each of you has something so valuable to share about your experiences with her. I think just like she remembered so many details about all of her students, I mean, it was phenomenal, I'm a teacher myself, and I barely remember my own students after 4 months. It's really sad. But Phyllis is the exact opposite. She would see somebody she hadn't seen in years, and how's your mother? This or that, and she knows their name. She knows their entire family, and everything. The attention to detail of other people's lives, and caring and concern, and striving for excellence and holding to a standard of excellence at the same time. It was so unusual, and I know all of you were touched. And all of you, like facets of the diamond, have something extremely important that you could share and add to a body of recognition of this great teacher. So I encourage you to consider something like that.
Yeah, I think probably video interviews would be nice. Set up where people can come and answer questions. All right. Anything else? Are we?
No. It's hard to, the music is so powerful that it says so much more than anything else, that it just puts you into a state of silence. Even though I'm talking, I'm still in this silent realm. And this was, not just, this afternoon wasn't just a celebration of Songs of Concord, but it did pay homage to Canticle as well. Just, I totally concur. It always struck me that how can an amateur choir be so good? That was always the dumbfounding element. So can I ask Maurice, the chef, is going to give us a vote of thanks.
Well, on behalf of the Institute of World Culture, I would like to thank, and most of the time I know I'm going to thank one person, but as I was thinking about giving the vote of thanks here, I don't really know who to thank because there's so many thanks. But certainly to Joe Miller, who has put together a wonderful presentation which envelops us, which took us through not only the principles, but through a multi-dimensional path, circling around, leading us essentially to a turning, to an inwardness, which represented a community, visible and invisible, which directed us to the heart. And so, on behalf of the Institute of World Culture, I would like to not only thank him, but certainly Nandini and Raghavan Iyer, Phyllis Zimmerman, Canticle, all of you. And it reminds me of that principle, that when you hear these words, you may have heard this phrase, but we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. We're not separate. We may be a microcosm, but we're not separate. And that feeling of non-separateness, of the reality or the fact of universal brotherhood, as was mentioned, we certainly got the opportunity to experience this with all of you in all its dimensions. So thank you, Joe, thank you, Kim, and thank all of you for a wonderful experience and educational session here today.